This is Apollo. He is a male hybrid falcon, a cross between a Gyr falcon and a Saker falcon. Normally, you would find him in the Arctic, but on this morning in June, he was in the front yard of the Dupuy residence north of Penns Creek in Snyder County. Mike Dupuy is a falconer and was showing us how he handles Apollo and his other falcons. Dupuy couldn't fly Apollo for us on this morning because he's a little fat, which isn't an insult at all, and may be a little hard to tell just by looking at him.
We have three terms for a bird. It's low, which is it's too low, meaning it doesn't have enough food to have energy. It's flying weight, which is the weight at which you're going to fly it, or it's fat. Fat is it's not going to respond to you when you call it. And so when I fly these birds, I'm preparing for the public. I'm preparing at least a week in advance. When temperatures get high, it's not going to lose weight like in the winter. In the winter, I could feed it 8 ounces, and the next day it weighs the same amount because it's metabolizing that food to stay warm.
Falconers like Mike monitor their bird's weight all along because he will fly it at a certain weight. The weight that they're at when they first eat a morsel of food after he traps them is probably going to be the weight that he flies it free. Apollo certainly didn't feel heavy to me as I got the chance to hold him on this morning. Mike first tried to put him on my fist without a hood, but he wasn't having any of that. So the raptor was then hooded and seemed absolutely okay with me then. Dupuy also showed us how he gets the falcons to return to him. Apollo was with us most of the morning we were here, sitting on a perch, hooded, as we talked with Mike. It turns out that putting a hood on a bird is almost like putting them to sleep, calming them down instantly. Mike Dupuy has been interested in falconry since the age of 9, when he saw the cover of a book called My Side of the Mountain by Gene Craighead George. It shows a falcon about to land on the fist of a young boy. Dupuy quickly read the book over and over and was bound and determined to get a hawk.
I would go on 3-mile treks to find a nest, but I wouldn't climb the tree. I wasn't quite ready for that. So I did all sorts of things to make it happen. But I remember clearly watching like a black and white, TV show, and 2 guys are driving on the beach, and they stop the Jeep and they get out and they bury one guy in the sand, and he's holding a pigeon. And the other guy drives away, and I think there were walkie-talkies involved. And he says, falcon coming down the beach. And he lets the pigeon go, and the falcon comes and kills the pigeon. And then he slowly reels it in the sand. And then when the falcon's right, and birds of prey are used to the food moving. We're not, but they are. And so he pulls it in, and when he gets it right to his hands, he grabs it, and he sits up in the sand. He has his head covered with a straw basket or something, so the bird can't see his face. And the bird's like, shocked, hanging upside down. So I saw this and I said, aha, now, Wile E. Coyote, I know what I'm going to do, So I got my brother, stepbrother, to go out in our field with us in upstate New York. And there had been some little sparrowhawks, kestrels, hanging around there. And I shot a mourning dove. I got him to cover me with some chicken wire to protect me from the talons of the birds. So sort of a chicken falconer at that point. And then he covered me with straw since we didn't have sand. And I sat there for about an hour waving this dead mourning dove, trying to catch a falcon. So I tried all sorts of things. I didn't know you shouldn't pluck it either. So it looked like just a hot dog waving it in the air.
It wasn't until he was 16 that Mike got a car and was able to drive around looking for birds. He then caught his first bird, a kestrel, which is a type of falcon. Falconry is the art and sport of hunting with birds of prey. The bird acts as your weapon and works in concert with the falconer and possibly a dog, which is used to flush out any smaller birds or small game. There's evidence of falconry dating back 10,000 years. There are between 4,000 and 4,500 licensed practicing falconers like Dupuy across the country, and about 150 to 175 in Pennsylvania. And for these professionals, it all starts with identifying what kinds of birds are in their area and which ones they want to trap. From there, it's all about trapping them. And as you would have guessed by now, Mike has gotten pretty good at it since that first time. He often uses pigeons or a mouse or rat in a trap made out of nooses of monofilament fishing line to catch a bird.
If it's a wild-taken bird, it's freaked out. It's scared. It doesn't understand what's going on. But they are very resilient, and this has been going on for a long time, as I said, and we have methods of doing this. So the first thing you do is you just secure the bird. Once the bird's secured, you get it home, you put the basic equipment on it. You put some anklets, which are like a wristwatch. You put the jesses, which are like a short leash on a dog. And you put a swivel, and then you put a leash on that. So then if you had the bird hooded, as this bird is with the thing that goes over its head, then you take that off and the bird's like freaked out again. So once the hood's on, it's like a sedative. They calm down. Once you take the hood off, they're freaked out. So you can have the bird wrapped in a towel, you can have a hood on it. You take it off, it falls off your fist. It can't even grab your fist. It's so scared, it just falls off over and over. So finally, it will just sit there and stare at you like, apprehensively, probably thinking you're about to kill it just like it does when it catches things. So after a time, the bird starts to calm down in your presence. And as it calms down, you begin to offer it food. And every time it looks at the food, you might do a whistle, like mine is like that. My birds know that that's a food call. So every time it looks at the food, you do the whistle. Eventually, after some time, it might be 12 hours, might be 24 hours, might be 48 hours, the bird says, to heck with it, he hasn't killed me yet, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat.
As a result of his searching and trapping exploits, Mike has a wide assortment of birds in cages behind his home, including several species of hawks and falcons. We got a tour of the birds and most weren't happy to see us at all, and were very camera shy. First, there were 2 Eurasian eagle owls that Mike and his wife Christine have been raising since they were just a few weeks old. This is the largest species of owl in the world, and they could eventually get up to between 7 and 9 pounds. Our cameras were allowed into a few of the cages with the birds, and this was the first one. They were obviously very nervous about this new person in their little world and the big black thing he was carrying. So nervous that they wouldn't eat any of the food that Mike was offering them. Next to them are Mick and Bianca, 2 Harris hawks that Dupuy is hoping to breed. That's a new thing he has been trying, and it has proved difficult in many cases, especially with the breed of bird Mike is most interested in, the goshawk. Breeding is a problematic and tricky procedure with the goshawks because the female has an alarming tendency to kill the male after it's all said and done. This was another occasion when our camera person Dylan Letkevich took one for the team to experience the thrill of a close-up look at one of these raptors, which also took flight in the cage several times, including once right by Dylan's head.
It's just an explosive bird. The red-tail tends to hunt from a perch. You'll be in a tree following the falconer and dog, if you have a dog and you're hunting with one. And you flush a rabbit and it will come down from the tree and try to strike the rabbit. If it misses, it lands on the ground and looks around like, where'd that rabbit go? A goshawk will leave the falconer's fist, not a tree, and just explode off the fist and catch the rabbit 50 feet away, 300 feet away. And if it misses, it will get back up and chase again and again and again. So it's a very cool bird to hunt with because you get to see the action right in front of you. I've had my dog on point, a pointer I had just passed away, but she'd be on point on a pheasant, and the goshawk would be waiting, and I'd let her know that there's something there. I have a call I'd make. And I'd send the dog in, and as soon as the pheasant explodes from where it is, the hawk takes off from the fist, overtakes and catches the pheasant. It doesn't always happen. They miss too, but when it does happen, it's exhilarating. It can happen 50 feet from your face, or it could happen 300 yards from your face, in which case you're just running, chasing the bird. So it's a very active sport. It's a sport where you're part of the wild. You're not looking through a scope at something far away. You're in the action.
Mike enticed many of the birds along the way with food and his whistle to stimulate them and let them know the food is there. The problem this time of the year is that it is warm, so the birds' metabolism isn't as high as it would be in the colder months, and they aren't as hungry. So some took the food right away, while others needed a little prodding, and a few didn't at all. Goshawks are called the ghosts of the forest, and that's where you may find them, right in the middle of a forest, although it took Mike 4 years to find a nest in this area. It seemed like it took just as long for this bird to build up the desire to make a serious effort to get this food, and will slow down his successful attempt. So, if you're like me, at one point during the interview, a nagging thought came into my head. All these birds in cages, and then out of them to work on training, flying, hunting, and maintenance, take time. Heading out into the woods to search for more birds and their nests take time. This seems like a full-time job for Mike, and it is. But how does he make a career out of being a falconer? It turns out he's the exception. Most falconers aren't doing this to make a living. They're doing it just as a sport or hobby. It became a career for Mike after taking a course in college.
I was going to night school at Georgetown University. I'd studied information systems management at University of Maryland and liberal arts at a community college, Montgomery College, right outside of D.C. And I went back to school, and at that point, I thought I was going to run for public office. That was my goal. I wanted to run for public office, be in Washington and all that stuff, or in Annapolis. And one thing led to another, and a couple of campaigns where I did well but lost. There was a course being offered called Work, Leisure, and Creativity. And I took that course with the politics in mind. But as that kind of waned, and I said, this is, you've either got to be a Kennedy, or Bush and have a lot of resources, or you've got to sell out and compromise your values and accept money from people you're going to have to serve. So I decided that the birds were also interesting to me. So at that point, that very same point, I started doing these small venue talks where I literally was looking at an index card. Okay, introduce myself. Okay, the history of falconry. Okay, the equipment. So I would look at the cards and just do my talk. And so one thing led to another, and that's evolved over the years. But that class is what made me think, hey, if I could do either the politics or this, and I wasn't thinking about the birds of prey at that point. That was by accident when the food supplier went out of business, and that grew and grew. But I quickly shifted over to this.
This now involves not only taking care of the birds, but taking them sometimes as far away as Washington, D.C. for demonstrations, heading to New York City to the George Washington Bridge for a medieval festival, or better yet, having visitors come here for a demonstration to see how they fly and then return to Mike, or head into the woods with two Harris Hawks on a hunting expedition to see how the birds work together as a team with the falconer to catch small game. But what may be the bread and butter for this operation was born out of necessity back in 1999.
For me, what I did is, back in 1999, my food supplier. So you have to feed these things. You can't go to Weiss or Walmart to buy your food. You've got to procure it from a farm agricultural business or some company that specializes in that. So my food supplier went out of business. Being an entrepreneur, I decided to start a small food business for raptors. And it was just called Hawk Food at first, and it became Mike Dupuy Hawk Food. We branded it, and we've got large institutional customers who order a pallet of food, say 1,000 pounds of food every month. And then we've got small individuals, a backyard falconer is one bird, two birds, that might get a small box of food delivered to them by FedEx.
Yes, these birds are carnivores and very efficient ones. They never want the carrot and celery. They just want raw meat. So they're fed whole foods because the birds need everything that's in that animal they're eating to stay healthy. So the Mike Dupuy Hawk Food brand has quail that they raise for them, along with mice, rats, and day-old chickens and roosters, which are a byproduct of the poultry industry. The bird will eat everything, bones and all, and then the next day they will spit up a pellet of everything they can't digest. That's called casting. Our visit to the Dupuy residence on this morning was a blast. We got to see some amazing creatures up close that up until now, we may have only seen cruising the skies. But on this day, Mike saved the best for last. We ended our tour in their kitchen, with Mike beginning the preparations to band and leash one of those enormous Eurasian eagle owls. Mike uses bands of kangaroo hide for the anklets because it's really strong, moves well, and has a perfect thickness to be out in the elements. As an added touch for the comfort of the bird, he puts tiny little notches along the edge of each anklet to make it more flexible for the bird. Then comes the big moment, when Dupuy brings one of the big birds right into the kitchen to the table. You can tell it's not happy at all because of the noises it's making, a little sound almost like a screech and a near constant tapping of its beak. They've been training them up to this point and socializing, but now they really want to start training them even more, so they need to put this equipment on them. Mike and Christine then set about the process of putting on the anklets and leash. Unlike the smaller birds, they can't put a hood on the owl, so they opt for a casting jacket to secure the bird's wings.
Now the bird can't flap, and therefore, boy, a lot of down feathers. And this is a perfect time to kind of examine them, see if there's anything wrong going on. See a little bit of a abrasion there. And his legs are nowhere as big as I thought. Around, you know. So one thing you could do is take masking tape and just put it around the talons to keep them from grabbing you. It's not that the bird's trying to hurt you, it just doesn't understand what's happening in it. It's reacting.
Once the anklets and the leash are on, Mike tries and succeeds to get the bird to sit on his fist for the first time. He then does something really interesting. He puts the bird on the kitchen floor. It's an important step for the owl because over time, they'll get used to all the traffic through the kitchen, including dogs and cats. Eventually, they won't even pay any attention to anything anymore because they'll be acclimated to being in a human environment.